Now that the winter meetings are over, should the Royals wait it out for their next big move or should they jump the gun? We'll dive into it in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can also catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. And before we dive into our first segment here, a reminder that beginning this week, this being the first episode of what we plan to do over the next 2 months or so, just 3 episodes a week. But unlike last year, for this 2-month stretch for our off season, I'm going to be a little bit more firm on when the episodes come out instead of just really any day and any time. I think that you can count on episodes every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. All of those will be coming out likely before 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So unless there's some breaking news, which I'm sure there will be throughout the rest of the off season, we plan on doing episodes every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So we will have that Mailbag Friday, and we will be giving you afternoon episodes at least for the next 2 months. And then once we get closer to spring training, we'll be back up to 5 episodes a week, and the times may vary on that again. But for our first episode this week, I thought it was a good time to, talk a little bit about the lack of aggressiveness that we've seen from the Royals over the last 2 weeks. Ever since the Jonathan India deal, it's been radio silent on the Royals front. But I also talked about that a little bit in our Mailbag Friday last week, and I believe another episode before that it's not overly concerning at this point because there's been a lot of competitive teams and playoff teams that have taken more of the silent approach, the patient approach. And when you think about how long the offseason is, moves can be made all the way up until really March. You don't want to have one of your big moves happening in February because you would like to have the guys you expect to be starters in your everyday lineup all on your roster, in my opinion, before really February even begins. I think you'd like to have everything in place by the time it nears end of January. That way, when pitchers and catchers in report, you're not waiting on anybody to get there. You're not waiting on some big move. We saw last year 2 of the big name free agents in Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery waited out because their agent was Scott Boras, and they only got a 1-year deal, and they had a slower start to the season. Jordan Montgomery never recovered, where Blake Snell did. He threw a no-hitter and got a big contract with the Dodgers this offseason. But going back to the Royals here and what the plan should be now, because the winter meetings are over. And last year, right after the winter meetings, the Royals got busy making some of their moves, bringing in Seth Lugo, Michael Wacha. Once the winter meetings ended, which is when a lot of conversations can happen, that's when things started to ramp up. But at least for now, it feels like across Major League Baseball, we have seen things really cool down, really simmer down. The Yankees have made big moves. The Mets have made big moves. The Red Sox have made big moves. The Astros and Cubs have made big moves. But everybody else, unless I'm leaving somebody out here, has been pretty quiet. And there's still a bunch of top-level free agents out there. Trades are still going to be happening. And to me personally, I don't think there is a need at this point in time to jump the gun. There were 2 pieces I read this morning that were very good reads. David Lesky of Inside the Crown and Preston Farr of Royals Miners on Twitter. You can find him over there. They both did excellent pieces on kind of the same idea of jumping the gun, waiting it out, being patient. And I think what I gathered from both of those pieces was that, when you are dealing with a team that's trying to move a player, for example, a Taylor Ward in Los Angeles, or you're looking at somebody on the White Sox, you're looking at somebody on Colorado or the Marlins, they want to move a piece. Oftentimes, and I would absolutely agree with this, oftentimes early on in the offseason, they're going to set the bar pretty high. They're going to have a high asking price because they're waiting to see who's desperate enough to jump the gun because they're nervous that somebody else will beat them to that player. But when that's the asking price for everybody, which sometimes it is, a lot of other teams get disinterested. They move on to somebody else. But if you stay the course, if you stay interested, eventually that price is going to come down because those teams that are honest with themselves about if they're going to be competing or not, they're going to want to move that player. And eventually they're going to cave in. I believe I read that exact paragraph of Inside the Crown with David Lesky. And I think with the Royals right now, that seems to be what the theme is, at least for the next couple of weeks. I am sure they tried to make a deal happen at the winter meetings. I don't think it was just a lie or a smoke screen that Mark Feinstein reported last week. The Angels were close to trading an outfielder, and that outfielder could have been Taylor Ward. It would not surprise me one bit if they just would have had a deal nearly in place, and then last minute they wanted to move around a different piece here or a different piece there, or they wanted to up the price a little bit. It happens all the time with trades, where if you feel like, hey, this deal is in place, well, maybe we think we can get a little bit more. And that's what I think some of these teams right now that are trying to move players, they're wanting to get some big-time returns. But the closer you get to spring training, the likelier it is that price is going to come down. And the cold, hard truth for the Royals is that they already shipped away their best trade chip in bringing in Jonathan India. So to get their middle of the order bat, they're going to have to be more creative with how they acquire that player. And if they still want a super utility guy or an athletic third baseman, as Annie Rogers wrote in one of her articles last week, I believe it was, is that a Josh Rojas? Is that a Brett Beatty? Who really knows at this point, because everything, as I said, across Major League Baseball has been a little bit quiet. But the Royals have this spot right now where I don't think you look at their offseason and think they've done nothing, because they have done something. They extended Michael Wacha to a healthy new deal, which now looks phenomenal considering some of the deals that went out there to free agent starting pitchers. And they acquired Jonathan India and traded one of their, I don't want to say centerpieces of the rotation, but a main staple of that rotation for a number of years. Like, those were two big moves for the Royals. And it allowed them, and I believe we talked about it back then when Jonathan India was acquired, it allowed them to kind of kick their feet up a little bit. They didn't have to be overly aggressive, as much as I would have liked to see it, as much as you would have liked to see it. They made two big moves, which then took some pressure off their shoulders of needing to be overly aggressive. And at times that can work against you, where you're so overly aggressive, you're so desperate that you cave into what the team you're trading with wants. And we've seen the Royals do that before. I think we've seen the Royals jump the gun sometimes, and it hasn't worked out well for them, where they thought maybe this is the best deal we're going to get. We're not really in a place to bargain. Therefore, we're going to take that deal. Like, I've always believed that when the Royals traded Wade Davis to Chicago, they felt maybe a little bit concerned that Jorge Soler either wouldn't be in a deal moving forward, or somebody else was going to acquire Jorge Soler, because in trading Wade Davis, I thought they got desperate. I thought when they moved him and all they got in return was Jorge Soler and not a bunch of prospects to go with it, that it felt like a rushed move. Now, I want to be very clear. Last year, the Royals were aggressive. I don't want to say jump the gun, because dealing with free agents is different than trading. I mean, if you go out there and you're negotiating with the free agent and you strike a deal that is seen by many as an overpay, maybe you can classify that as jumping the gun. You didn't wait for the negotiations to drop a little bit, and then you get more into your price range. I thought the Royals got good value for Seth Lugo, good value for Michael Wacha, good value for Will Smith, Chris Stratton, Nick Anderson. I know Nick Anderson was technically a trade because he was getting non-tendered, but Hunter Renfroe out there was another free agent acquisition. Adam Frazier was later on. Garrett Hampson was early on. Like, nothing struck me as, wow, that's an overpay. When you're dealing with trades and it seems like the Royals want to go through the trade route for their middle of the order bat, jumping the gun can be seen as negative. Because I think, considering how quiet things have been across Major League Baseball, there's not really a rush right now. The Tigers haven't made any moves. The Twins really haven't made any moves. Cleveland's made a move by trading away Andres Jimenez, and then trading away they got for Andres Jimenez away to, I believe it was it Cincinnati? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head who that player was. But they basically got a guy and then flipped him immediately. So that's the big move that Cleveland's made. But the American League Central has been pretty quiet. I mean, hell, the White Sox have made a couple more moves than some of the other top contending teams in the American League Central. But when you're trying to trade for a middle of the order bat, I don't think you want to rush it because I think you want to get this one right. Like if you have somebody you are head over heels for, that feels like the perfect fit, then I think jumping the gun's the right deal. That means that you've got some prospects in mind of who you're willing to trade. That team's all right with it. You pull off that trade. But I also think this, if the Royals were head over heels for somebody and they felt like they were a perfect fit, they would have been acquired by now. Or the team they're negotiating with is wanting a Carter Jensen, is wanting a Blake Walters, is wanting a Blake Mitchell. And that's just not going to fly for the Royals. I don't think they're going to want to go out and acquire that middle of the order bat and at the same time completely deplete their minor league system. And so that's why I think when it's December 17th, I believe it is. Yeah, December 17th, there's time to make a move. And with the Royals going the trade route other than free agency, if it was free agency that they're trying to plug a lot of different guys into and fill a lot of spots with, then I think I would have liked to see more aggression. But when you're dealing with a trade, you can be more patient on it and wait till you get the perfect deal in place. And I have full confidence that JJ Picollo and company are going to be able to do that. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, let's talk about Annie Rogers' most recent article and going over tiers in the bullpen. Who's a lock? Who's going to be competing for a spot? Who are the late inning guys? We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our title sponsor today in Gametime. Look, Christmas is right around the corner, or whatever holiday you may celebrate. And if you're thinking about getting tickets for somebody, whether it be to a concert, to a future game, do so over at Gametime. Already one of my gifts was purchased on Gametime. Got a ticket for a game on the road for Royals next year. And I'm very excited that I'll be traveling to this place once again. But it was very simple the way I went about it. I could add in a parking pass as well. But I don't need a parking pass at the place I'll be going to because I park for free over there, at least the place that we found. But it was very simple to do. I thought it was a really good idea for Christmas. And there's some upcoming concerts here in Kansas City, comedy shows as well, that if you think it'd be a good gift for somebody you know and love, I strongly recommend you buy them over at Gametime. So here's what you need to do. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It is game time. Well, in going over some of the segments that we had planned for today, I always love to scroll around Twitter, MLB.com, ESPN, The Athletic. You've heard me say this before. And oftentimes, I don't think I've ever missed a new article, at least this offseason, from Annie Rogers, especially during winter meetings when all this stuff is up in the air. There's rumors circulating. You'd like to know what the beat reporters for the Royals are actually saying about the matter because they're down there. They're interviewing Matt Quatrero. They're interviewing JJ Picollo. And one of the pieces I really liked and wanted to go over in the second segment today was Annie's article, which was done 4 days ago, on the 3 tiers for the Royals bullpen heading into 2025. And I'll be quite honest, it did surprise me a little bit with who the locks are, who are the players that are in the mix for the bullpen, and then who are the guys that are fighting for a spot in the bullpen. So we're going to kick things off here going over the locks in the bullpen. If you're watching on YouTube, you kind of know the one that we are surprised a little bit about. But the locks they have for the bullpen, or Annie has for the bullpen, is Lucas Erceg. Not really a surprise there. We feel like he is going to be the closer for this bunch. Hunter Harvey, you've heard us talk on this podcast multiple times about how highly the Royals view Hunter Harvey, how they feel about Hunter Harvey and him bouncing back in 2025. And even in this article, she references that Picollo said Harvey will begin throwing next week and is expected to be ready in the spring. Ideally, Harvey will pitch the high leverage innings in front of Ursig, which in my opinion would be the setup role. He's pitching in the 7th or the 8th inning. John Schreiber, the other lock, not going to fight that as well. He still had an additional year of control. He finished the year, I think, very strong. And I think that if he is 100% healthy going into spring training, you'll see much more of the second half or late second half John Schreiber than we did in that middle portion, maybe even April John Schreiber, as we talked about a lot last year, how good he was for the bullpen. But I thought late in the season, in the postseason, the command got a lot better. The stuff got a lot sharper. So John Schreiber, easily a lock there. And the last lock for this article is Chris Stratton. And I understand why Chris Stratton would be brought up in regards to the bullpen, the late inning guys who would be a lock, because he has that additional year of control. And the Royals aren't just going to cut somebody because, hey, they weren't great last year. There's no chance they're going to be good this year. I think the Royals look at the options they have and feel pretty highly about what they could do in 2025 to help out the bullpen. And when they brought in Chris Stratton, I don't think there was ever a feeling that he was going to be the setup guy or the closer. He did close out a few games for the Royals. And honestly, after his really bad start in April, he went through a stretch where he pitched pretty well. And he was starting to get trusted in the 6th and 7th inning. But then toward the middle of the year, and especially when the Royals started to trend downward in the last 40, 50 games or so, he really spiraled and then got put on the injured list. Maybe he wasn't healthy for a large portion of the middle part of the season, which is why he struggled so much. The command was way off, and that was not really a typical thing for him when the Royals brought him in. He was somebody that always had pretty good command. He had really good spin rate on the curveball, and the Royals liked that. That was the main reason they liked Chris Stratton, was his ability to throw strikes and the spin rate on the curveball. So for him to be a lock in 2025, it either means that they really believe Chris Stratton, like a Hunter Harvey, can bounce back and be very effective in the middle innings for the Royals out of the bullpen, or they just don't feel as strongly about somebody else being able to take his spot. Or this is kind of just a December 17th conversation, and come spring training, Chris Stratton's not going to be on that roster. And I could certainly see that as well. And also I should mention that Andy Rogers points that out about Chris Stratton in this article, saying Stratton had a poor 2024 and exercised his $4.5 million player option to return in 2025. He ended the year on the IL with a right forearm strain, so the Royals are hoping he'll be better when healthy next year and able to pick up the middle innings. They could also try to trade him and eat the money if they need a roster spot, but as of now, he's a part of the team. And I think I could see that too being a just December 17th conversation. We are months away from spring training. There's no real rush to worry about that roster spot when it comes to Chris Stratton or somebody else. But since he's under contract and he wasn't just let go at the end of the year and they ate the money that way, I would put him in the locks as well. But I would say right now, my gut tells me Chris Stratton's just not going to be in that bullpen in 2025, because I think there are much better options. Even if Chris Stratton is the bounce back, I think there are guys with higher upside and who I'd feel more confident in being better than a better version of Chris Stratton in 2025. Now for the guys in the mix: Chris Bubich, Kyle Wright, Daniel Lynch, Alec Marsh, Sam Long, Angel Serpa, James MacArthur, and Carlos Hernandez. As I've said before, I think Chris Bubich and Alec Marsh are the number 4 and number 5s in the rotation. So personally, I'm going to take them out of the mix here. Kyle Wright, I think, can be in that spot, but I got to see him be healthy first. Daniel Lynch, I would say, is closer to a lock as long as he stays healthy. I think the Royals really liked what he did and his specific role in the bullpen in September. I think Sam Long is going to be a lock as well. Angel Serpa, unless they trade him. We talked about that in Thursday's episode last week about him generating some trade interest. James MacArthur, I don't see why he would be in AAA to begin the year or let go, because they're going to need another right-hander. James MacArthur could be somebody that would take that Chris Stratton spot, and maybe that's the debate it comes down to. Do you want to have Chris Stratton in the bullpen, or do you want to have James MacArthur? I think I go with James MacArthur over Chris Stratton in that spot, because I think the upside is much higher than what Chris Stratton's could be, even if he improves. And then Carlos Hernandez in the mix, I think because of familiarity, because of experience, it would make a lot of sense. But I've also said the guy like Steven Cruz, who Andy Rogers has as an outside shot, I would put him over Carlos Hernandez, because that new cutter that he was working on in 2024, I think that could really play well in 2025. But the outside shots she has is Noah Cameron, Steven Cruz, Jonathan Bolin, Evan Sisk, Eric Sarantola, and Luander Avila. Love the idea of Evan Sisk making this bullpen as well because of the funky arm angle he brings, the strikeout numbers he had in Omaha. Going to have to clean it up with the command, but I do like the Tim Hill type of look if he is to make the club coming out of spring training. Not sold that somebody like Noah Cameron is going to get a shot out of spring training unless he dominates in spring training. Jonathan Bolin, I just am not sold on anymore. Eric Sarantola, like the upside, think he still needs some grooming down at the minor league level. Same thing with Luander Avila. But Steven Cruz and Evan Sisk, I think, could have a really good shot to jump somebody who we mentioned in the mix, or maybe even some of the guys that were locks for the bullpen. Okay, let's take our final break of the show. When we come back, let's go over the AL power rankings right now and where the Royals may stack up. And hopefully you like where I have them. Maybe you think I rated them too highly, too lowly. But anyway, we're going to dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to two sponsors, beginning with FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And for my pick, I'm going to go with the over on passing yards for Justin Herbert and his game against the Broncos coming up on Thursday Night Football. Also want to tell you about SelectQuote. The World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing, teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. So get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/locked-on. Go to SelectQuote.com/locked-on today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/locked-on. Well, I did mention that this was going to be my power rankings. I did lie a little bit. These are going to be FanGraphs power rankings and where they have all these teams going in 2025. And they broke it down from batting war, pitching war, overall projected record. And I think for the most part, considering what Steamer projections look like, the PECOTA projections have usually looked like for the Royals, you'll feel pretty satisfied about where Kansas City stacks up. So on FanGraphs, and again, I think there's going to be 100 win teams out there. The highest win total they have for any team out there is 93. And I think you'll be a little bit surprised with who it is, considering some of the moves that were made this offseason. But again, the FanGraphs power rankings, these were done, I think, coming up on a month ago. So I guess I should say we can move them around a little bit. So I wasn't completely lying. We can put our own spin on it a little bit. So these were before the Juan Soto moves were made. The Blake Snell move was made. So that absolutely has changed around some certain things. But the most recent power rankings I could find online were from FanGraphs, done about a month ago. So we can give our own updates to it. And more importantly, this is about the American League. And other than the Yankees, nobody else in the American League has made too many moves. So about a month ago here, and we'll make our own spin to this, FanGraphs had the Braves as the #1 team going into 2025 at 93-69. Right behind them, the Dodgers at 90-72. But you factor in some of the guys the Dodgers brought back, who they brought in, Blake Snell being the most notable there. They are the second and the only 90-plus win team in Major League Baseball. The Phillies behind them at 87-75. And then you have the number one team on the American League side in the Astros at 86 and 76. I'm going to disagree with that a little bit now, of course, and this was done a month ago. I think Kyle Tucker being moved to Chicago is going to drop them down a few pegs, so I wouldn't have them number one. My number one, who they have third here in the American League, is the Yankees. I think the Yankees right now are going to be the number one team. Even though they lose Juan Soto, they bring in Max Fried. I think they're going to make a play for Cody Bellinger. I think they're going to make a play for Christian Walker. They went out there and got Devin Williams. This should be the favorite once again in the American League. They've got the reigning MVP. They won the American League the previous year, and they got better in the rotation. So the Yankees, to me, are going to be number one. Right behind the Yankees, this is where it gets a little bit difficult. I think it comes down to, do you believe Cleveland is going to be a team that wins 90-plus games again, or 95-plus games? Because FanGraphs a month ago had the Guardians as the 26th best team in Major League Baseball. So they're factoring a little bit of luck that happened to them in 2024. They have the Guardians sub 500 at 79 and 83. And by the way, they have the Royals 11th. This was a month ago, after they had made those moves for, at least it was the move for Michael Wacha. Not sure if November 14th or 15th was before or after the Jonathan India deal. But the Royals at 83 and 79, which would have made them the seventh best team in the American League, so a playoff team. They are behind the Rangers, Mariners, and Twins. I'm going to be pretty surprised if the Twins bottom out in the way they did last year. It's not going to surprise me if the Twins finish in a top two spot in the American League Central. Really, it comes down to what type of moves they can make. I mean, they've been very quiet once again, but that's been a little bit of a regular thing for Minnesota fans. And my college roommate was a Minnesota Twins fan, a diehard Minnesota sports fan, and he's always been frustrated about the lack of moves they make in the offseason. But I think on the American League side, I have to go Yankees number one. Once again, I have to go with the Orioles number two. The Red Sox could be close to that, but right now I'm not going to put them there. I do think an American League Central team has to be third in the power rankings there. And because of their year, I'm not going to completely disregard what Cleveland did. I'm going to put Cleveland third because of that bullpen. Even with the lower payroll, they always seem to play well. They're a tough out for the Royals, it feels like, every single year. Though last year, I thought Kansas City really competed well with the team that ended up winning the American League Central. But to me, I go Yankees, I go Orioles, then I'm going to go with the Guardians. Then I think I might go Mariners for now. And then right behind them, I think I would put the Royals at 5 on the American League side here. Detroit could be a team that I could flip-flop with Seattle, depending on what moves they make. If they go out there and get another big-name starter to pair with Tarek Skubal and Alex Cobb, who they brought in on a one-year deal, I could have Detroit at 4, Kansas City at 5, because I could see Detroit winning the Central next year as well, but they got to make more moves for me to truly believe in that. So we'll go Yankees, Orioles, who do I have? Cleveland. I'm going to go Mariners for now, Royals, Tigers. Then I'll go Twins. Then I think you would get down to, I think I'll go Rangers there at 8. I think they're going to have a good bounce back year. They bring back Nathan Eovaldi. I think I'll go with the Rangers there, Red Sox not far behind them, and then you get to some of those bottom teams in the American League like the Athletics, though I do think they're going to be a sneaky improving team this year. Wouldn't be shocked if they get, above 75 wins this next year. Angels, I think, are going to be one of the bottom teams in the American League once again. White Sox will round it out at the very bottom. So that's what I got right now. The Rays were one of those teams I didn't mention. I'm really unsure about what the Rays will look like. That's why I don't really know where to place them. I think they could be as good as top 5. I think they could be as bad as like the 10th or 11th best team in the American League. So that one, kind of up in the air. I'll put them right behind Boston for the time being. And I think if Boston makes a couple more moves, they can leapfrog all the way to top 5. So even though I didn't completely give you a breakdown of where everybody is, that's who I kind of have in my top 5. Those are some of the teams I have contending for like the 6 through the 9 spots. But still, lots of moves to be made here on the American League side for some of those teams in need of more depth in their lineup, more depth in their rotation. Teams like the Royals, teams like the Mariners, teams like the Twins and Guardians, they make more moves. This power ranking completely shifts coming up closer to spring training. But still, a lot to be done this offseason, especially for your Kansas City Royals. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB as baseball guru Sully brings you a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get to your podcast. We will be back on Thursday talking more offseason ball and what moves the Royals could make. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.